Hello and welcome to Unlimited Realities. I am your host, Lisa Zimmer, and I am really excited, everybody, to bring you the show that we have today. It is with Dr. Scott Robinson, who he himself experienced a near-death experience, and we're going to talk about his near-death experience, which is so surreal in so many ways because he woke up in the morgue and astonishing all those who were there, in addition to many others. So Scott has learned a lot from his near-death experience. There's a tremendous amount of service that Scott is working with in spirit, and a lot of information that Scott is channeling in regard to his new connections and consciousness from his near-death experience, which I can attest to, having had a near-death experience. It was after mine that my intuition really kicked in. So without further ado, welcome, Dr. Scott Robinson. Thank you so much for being on Unlimited Realities today.
Thank you, Lisa, for having me. And we just both found out that we both live in Florida.
That's right. This is being taped live from Florida, folks. So, Scott, you have a phenomenal story, and I am one of those people who cannot get enough of near-death experiences, personal stories, because I have had one. I know how powerful they are. I know how transformative they are. And I also know how unsettling they can be for so many people. Like, not everybody gains altruism from a near-death experience. You and I may have, but many people with near-death experiences actually struggle in the experience in trying to move on with purpose, with life, with what they have experienced. So let's start at the beginning, Scott. You had a near-death experience. What prompted this? What happened? What happened that you went into that state? Let's go there.
First of all, for the average audience listening, this might be their first show, maybe multiple shows they've heard about near-death experiences. It must be pre-programmed in heaven before you come to earth. So people have asked me time and time again, well, can I have one? I can't say that.
Right.
It has to be from the divine. It has to be a contract. All right, what happened? First near-death experience, I was age 17, just graduated high school. My dad, who worked in the car, a used car for my graduation. I needed a car.
Right.
I was going to go off to college. And as a matter of fact, I was supposed to go to the Naval Academy. I had been invited by the Naval Academy, the Coast Guard Academy, and the Air Force Academy. So I was going to go into one of those, and I actually got an award from the congressman locally that said, I'm going to school. Thank you. And you're going to be part of the military and the government.
Wow.
3 days after high school graduation, with my intent that I had 1 month before I had to go away to the academy, I was taking my car for a nice long drive. My friend Lou had a house on Lake Opatcon on the New York-New Jersey border. And if anybody knows that area of the country, it was a big, long lake.
Right.
And I had never gone fishing. And Lou said, come on, let's go enjoy. I'm going to take you up to where my mom and dad go. We're going to go fishing because you've never been. I said, great. I'll pick you up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Gave my mom and dad a kiss goodbye. Got in my car, my 1968 Mercury Montego, white exterior with a nice black and red decal on the side, black window roof, red bench seats, if you remember those, Lisa.
Oh, yeah, guy's perfect car, that was like the hot rod car for the guys.
Oh, yeah, it had a 2-engine in it. Anyway, that car hummed. It just hummed. And it got pretty decent gas mileage for a big block engine. So I went down the highway, Route 80, went to pick up Lou, and it was in downtown Patterson in the Italian district. And I got back on the highway, and I started to feel really strange. Matter of fact, I was feeling so weird. I looked down at my hands as I'm driving up the entrance onto the Route 80, which the sign actually said downtown Patterson, next exit. And all of a sudden, I could look through my fingers and my hands. I went, oh, man, if this is death, there's nothing to fear.
Wow.
Later on, the police report would indicate that I drove 23 miles and didn't have any recollection of it, didn't know exactly what happened. It was like a scene out of a movie, only I was living it.
Wow.
And here I was coming in and out of this reality. Now, my friend Lou had gone back to sleep sitting next to me in the passenger's compartment, and I came out, went above the earth. A being stood next to me or floated next to me, and I realized it was an angel.
Okay.
And he said, look down at the earth and tell me what you see. And I said, I see these lines, some small and thin, some pretty heavy, like a tree trunk with lots of roots stuck together. He said, do you know what those are? And I said, no. And he said, those are prayers. The thin ones are individual prayers, and the thick ones are prayers from many people praying for the same thing. And I said, oh, that's nice. He said, we got to go now. And I went down this tunnel, like they always talk about a tunnel, like being in the back seat of a car, and it drives real fast, and you just see things blurring by you, just moving at speed of light. And there I appear at the end of the tunnel, which looks like at the beginning of the gates of heaven. It's not like the gates of heaven that they show you in the movies, but it's just, I knew I was here at heaven.
Okay.
And there was my grandfather. I'm named for my grandfather. Jewish people are named for the grandfathers and grandmothers that have passed away. I'd never met him in life. He had died 2 years before I was born. But he said, you can't stay here. You don't belong. You have to go back. But before you do, I have someone to introduce you to, someone for you to meet. And he took me into a small room, and he disappeared. And in that room was a being whose back was facing me, and I saw the back of his hair. He was just slightly smaller than I was. Not curly, but wavy hair, brown.
Okay.
And in front of him was a being facing me, and I knew that was Michael the Archangel. How I knew that, I don't know, but I just knew it was.
Interesting.
And to his right, my left, was another angel, but I didn't recognize him. And as the being in front of me turned around, I said, are you the being everybody calls Jesus? And I was pointing at him, and he smiled, and I knew immediately it was. He
wow.
said, I'm called by many names, but because of my heritage, I will call you the Little Prince of Peace, and you can call me Big Brother. But you have to go back now because you haven't fulfilled your purpose and missions in life. And I'm like, oh, man. And I took my right fist and hit it against my left palm, and suddenly I got drawn back into my body. But in the long story and short of the whole thing, when I realized that there was other beings in that room, that other being really quickly said, you will figure out who I am in the future, and you will learn a simple technique to heal yourself and share that with other people. So I got my first request of what I needed to do for my mission and purpose in life.
Wow.
Simultaneously, Lisa, my mom and dad are called. Now, this is 2 hours after I had left the house. The police, the highway patrol called them and said, please come identify your son's body.
Dear God. Dear God. Right.
So, mom is psychic and intuitive. She was born on Halloween. She told my dad,
I was in labor on Halloween and prayed to God my daughter wouldn't be born till the next day, and that's what happened.
So you understand.
I get it.
She was born on Halloween. She was born at 4:31 p.m.
Wow.
on that night of Halloween, because she said the kids went out on Halloween before she was born. And my grandmother told me she was born at home. So in those days, in 1925,
right,
people were born at home.
Right.
Long story short, mom always knew what was going on with me. I could never hide anything.
Right.
So anyway, she told my dad, Herman, that was my dad's name, he's going to be okay. You'll see, he's going to be okay. So they drove to the hospital, St. Joseph's Hospital in Patterson, New Jersey. There's only 2 hospitals in those days in that town, Barnet Hospital and St. Joseph. And my sister was born there, but I was actually born somewhere else. But long story short, They get called, they go there, they drive there, and the hospital's built on a slight hill. And the emergency room's on one side, it's higher. And my mom says to my dad, no, don't go to the emergency room, go around the back, which was around the basement was behind, so you could enter it from another level. And they went, parked in front of the morgue door. It actually said morgue door. They got out, parked the car, walked in, and the hallway was kind of dark. One of the lights was out, I guess. It's like something out of a movie. They walked down the hallway, and they saw a man wearing what appeared to be like scrubs, pushing a body covered up with a sheet on a metal gurney into the morgue refrigeration unit. And they walked down thinking, well, maybe this guy can tell us where we can find my son. And as they got close to this gurney, the man disappeared. And my mom and dad, they told me this years later, but they said he just kind of vanished. And they said, well, maybe because it was a dark hallway, maybe he stepped to the right or left and they didn't see it.
Right.
So they go to this gurney and they pull the sheet back, and it's me.
Oh.
And I sit up.
No.
Oh, God, I met Grandpa.
No. Yeah. Oh my gosh, Scott. That's wild.
So,
go ahead.
Hey, when I told even Alexander this, he was like, what? So, all right, long story short, I said, Mom, Dad, I met God, I met Grandpa. And they said, son, you were in an accident, you hit your head. I said, oh, okay. So they said, come on with us. And I went, oh, man, my head hurts really bad because I still have a dent in the right side of my head where it hit.
Wow.
Where the door frame and the window where hit my head on that side. And my side of my jaw, my face on the left side, according to the dentist, is flat. It's become changed over the years.
Wow.
And they said it shows an impact of an old injury. So, hey, when I was first pronounced dead, the guy that called my mom and dad, he was the police officer. He said they opened the door of the car and I fell out and my head landed on his boot. And so I think I tell that story a little slightly different because I remembered it differently. And the police officer is the one that called my mom and dad. All right. So they take me hand in hand. Mom took one arm. Dad took the other arm because I hurt so bad. My head was so bad. They walked me down the hall. We went out. There's two doors. They were swinging, and they walked me out. They put me in the back of the car, and they drove away. And the next day, I would go to Montefiore Hospital in New York in the Bronx to have an EKG.
Okay.
And Mom and Dad and the doctor would tell me, we don't really know what happened to you, but your DMT levels were way off the charts. And if you know anything about your death experiences, people like us have high levels of dimethyltryptamine in our body, which is considered hallucinogenic. But they found the Institutes of Health, the NIH, actually found that to really identify a person who's had a true near-death experience, their dimethyltryptamine are off the shelf, so to speak. It's really high, and they never go back to normal. Now, at this time, Raymond Moody had just written his book and had just been published, Life After Life.
Right.
And both the doctor, the neurologist I was working with, and my mom found the book and gave it to me and said, here, I think you better read this because I think it might explain what happened to you.
Wow.
So as a result, I was supposed to go away to school. I had just been going to, I went from high school, a Jewish boy at Catholic school, and I was going to go to the academy, but I really didn't have anywhere to go because now I got a notice from the military saying, we heard you had an accident and you're no longer qualified to join the ranks of the academy. So I'm like, but where do I go? I'd only applied to one other school, and that was Southampton College, Long Island University, which is now part of Stony Brook, and the medical school there. So I went for 1 year because I had nowhere else. I applied later, and the next year I would go to Montclair State, which is Montclair State University now. It used to be a teacher's college in New Jersey, but I could live on campus and be closer to mom and dad because the doctor at Montefiore said, look, we don't know exactly what happened to you, but I would prefer that you would voluntarily not drive, and I'll let you keep your license. Otherwise, I'm going to have your license revoked. And I said, okay, I'll voluntarily not go and not drive. And then my mom and dad had to help me find a school that would take me so I could live on campus.
Okay.
So life would change.
Right.
Now, I always had some kind of psychic intuitive gift. Before this happened, I was able to bet on football games and be very accurate as long as I didn't bet for myself. So kids in high school used to take my predictions and they used to bet, but they never gave me any money for it after they would win. So I said, screw you, I'm not doing this anymore. I might be popular, but I'm not profiting from this.
Right.
And I stopped it. I said, hey, you're not giving me anything for this. Why should I share it with you? So after the near-death experience, now these gifts began to escalate. I was aware of things. They started to tell me all sorts of things. They said you would be aware of 38 past lifetimes that you once lived, that you were here to complete or finish up what you could not finish in those lifetimes. For instance, my parents were once my children, and in the 1750s, they were about 12 years old, and I was a doctor, a physician, Jewish physician, working for Maria Theresa, the Empress of Austro-Hungary.
Wow.
Now, she did not like Jewish people. So because I was Jewish, she would send me the far-flung part of her kingdom. And she had me on loan to the Russians. And I was on loan to both the Russians and the Prussians. And in those days, the doctors were only the doctors, but they would always write back to whoever they, owned their contract and would tell them stories about what was happening in the other kingdom. In a way, it was like being a spy for the Empress.
Okay.
So, when I was a kid, I was like, why am I automatically wanting to be like spy-like? And I didn't know why. And it came from probably that past lifetime. So my kids in that lifetime, I have met the woman who was my wife, and she's a podcaster in California.
Oh, that's wild.
And long story short, she was the daughter of one of the royalty in that family household.
Oh, that's wild.
And because there was some kind of incest going on, she was told she couldn't stay. The babies couldn't be hers because it was not kosher. So I volunteered to adopt the children and make them mine and, quote, marry her for a marriage that was, fake, but so that she would have honor. And she went and lived the rest of her life in a nunnery. Those children would grow up, and one of the kids that I met at this nunnery, I also adopted. She was older than my children, and she became the au pair that took care of my kids.
Oh, wow.
And I met her too in this life, and she lives up in Washington State, Julianne. And so all of these people I would meet, and I said, Father God, how am I going to know who's my brothers and sisters dealing from past lifetimes? And they said, you would instantaneously recognize them, and the images you had from past lives would be downloaded so that you could be aware of who they are and what you needed to do to fix that in this lifetime. You lived many more lifetimes, but you would not be aware of those things. Only these 38 lifetimes that had something to do with the present reality. And then when I came back, I started telling my mom and dad about these stories and how they were my children and I had to help them. And it was my job to assist them.
How did they handle that? How did they handle that information, your parents?
My mom had no problem. And dad was like, okay, what can I tell you? He was okay. Now, they wanted me to keep this secret.
Of course.
Being a Scorpio, she did not want me to tell my brothers and sister.
Okay.
Especially because I had made this pact with my doctor that I wouldn't tell them exactly what was going on. They did not know what to do with me. The DMT levels were off the charts. My EKG and ECG were like weird.
Did they ask you at the time when your DMT was off the charts, did they ask you if you had taken any hallucinogenics or drugs?
Oh, there's the first question they asked.
Yeah.
And I said, drugs? What are you talking about?
Right.
He could see that I was, I didn't even have hair on my face. I'm 17 years old. I hadn't even shaved yet, right? And they realized I was pretty clean,
right?
Especially since we had cops in the family, and I used to work with the Patterson, the police department. The man who would become the chief of police in Patterson was also my defense instructor. You know, I learned martial arts as a kid, and he was my defense instructor. He knew I didn't take any drugs. So that was the first question they asked.
Okay, so let's skip ahead to some of the experiences that you experienced after your near-death experience, because I know you've had a lot of downloads and I know you've had a lot of information that's come through, and there's a lot going on in our world right now. We're in the midst of a lot of change, right, Scott? And
change. This on my birthday, I always get a special, as you call it, download, but I get information. And usually my God voice or my angels will come and talk to me. And I always know my angels by their frequency of smell. They actually have fragrance.
Okay, cool.
I know every one of my angels by their fragrances. I know good guys and bad guys. I can identify who's around who. Anyway, long story short, my birthday is always a good time for this information. And I heard you're about to enter the time of earthquakes and soul shakes.
Okay.
A time of fire, ice, and fog.
Wow.
And you would be aware of all of this about what's going on. So I run a group of spiritually minded individuals who do this technique that they sent me back for. Remember, I was sent back to learn a simple technique to heal myself and share it with other people.
Yes.
And this technique is called Einstein.
Okay.
So I run a group who are all my clients from all over the world, and I started to tell them everything that started to happen. And when I get to meet a client that I'm in tune with, the vibrations open up and I start to tell them everything about what's going on with them. So I have this group, I teach them what they need to do, how to fulfill their purpose and missions in life, and what they need to do to heal. So this technique, Einstein is a German word, and it means tuning into the source, asking for help, and healing. So I teach this every 2 weeks to all my new clients, and we meet online on Zoom. And then also, since I opened up a church, every Sunday afternoon, about 4:30, we have people to the house, and we have a dinner, and we do Einstein in person here in Apopka. So we do it online every 2 weeks, and we do it in person every week. And then coming up, Daytona Beach area and Casadega Church, the Spiritualist Church, will start to have them once a month on Saturday nights up in that area near Casadega.
Very cool.
Long story short, when I come back, I begin to have these bits of information constantly coming in, and angels will come and tell me stories, including those from people who have crossed over to the other side and want to leave messages for family relatives. And I'll bring up a story about a young lady by the name of Liliana. Liliana was 8 years old when she realized, even though she was born in a Mexican-American Catholic family, that she wasn't Catholic, that she was actually Jewish. And she tried to explain this to her family living in Chicago, that she was actually not who they thought she was.
Okay.
Long story short, Liliana had been with me in a past life during the time of Alexander the Great. And she was actually, in those days, my nephew.
Okay.
And she said to me when I met her, how do you know that I had this very strange interest about war? I don't like war, and I seem to have vivid memories of war. And I started to tell her about how the fact that we were in that life and we were part of Alexander's army going into Eastern Central Asia, India, and those places and fighting. So long story short, she tells me, can you pray for my uncle and my aunt? My aunt's very ill. And this is one of the things I'm known for. I'm known for prayers, doing Einstein, and pushing negative dark energy away called faint matter from people so they can heal. So 3 days after I started doing prayers for this lady, I heard stop. Okay, I stopped. And shortly after that, I heard she had died. And in the room, and my mom actually smelled the fragrance of the angels with me, an angel appeared, and I said to the angel, I don't recognize your fragrance. You're new to me. As a matter of fact, you're kind of a new smelling angel. And the angel replied, I'm only 2,000 years old. And yes, I'm new to this task. I had to fill in because we're a little busy over here. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes. You're only seeing the tip of the iceberg, but there's 10 times more things happening than you realize.
Right.
I said, okay. And I asked, or actually the angel said to me, I'm taking a being back to heaven, and she has a message for you. And then I started to ask, are you Liliana's aunt? And she said, yes. And she said, first of all, I wanted to say thank you for doing prayers for me. It helped me release from my earthly body so I could leave and go back to heaven. And I said, good, I'm glad. She said, could you continue to do prayers for my husband? I'm very concerned about him because he started to drink heavily when I was ill. And I'm afraid that he would become an alcoholic after I go home. I said, okay, I'll pray for him. And so for the next 3 weeks, I would pray for him. And then I was told to stop praying for him because he gave up all alcohol.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Now,
when she was done talking to me, the fragrance of the angel would vanish. And so would she. And she was on her way home. And I had to call Liliana and tell her the story. She introduced me to her cousin, was her mother.
Right.
And then she called me and said, how do you know about my mom? You don't know anything about my mom. And I started to tell her 10 things that her mother had told me about her life and her children. And she said, nobody knows any of that stuff. How did you know that? I said, because I talked to your mother, and she gave me this information so that you would believe it.
Right.
Because even Liliana didn't know some of these things.
Well, I mean, that's an incredible connection. And you also have, so moving on from, you've established definite past life connections here. Let's talk about the current effects that the world is going through and what information you have received about that. Because you were talking about some of the fires, earthquakes, and fog. And we did have this blanket of fog about several weeks ago that blanketed quite a big portion of the United States, and people were questioning it. We had this big, thick blanket of fog. And now we have the fires and we have the earthquakes. And I've also heard recently that some pastor out of Oklahoma is predicting another massive earthquake taking up kind of towards the mid-America, like Tennessee. I forget what the fault line is, Madrid fault line or something?
Madrid fault line will be in St. Louis, and it was the site of the largest earthquake over 150 years ago. And because of all the solar flares, that's part of the fires.
Okay.
Solar flares that are immense. Second, what people don't know what's happened in LA. They had a satellite taking video, that they do all the time because there's satellites over above us. And this was infrared showing 5 times the level of carbon dioxide and monoxide coming out, not from automobiles, but coming out from underneath the land space under LA. Because people were saying, how did this really start?
Right.
Conspiracy theory. They said there's 5 times more things. Now, what people don't know is there are 427 earthquakes today alone on the charts that you'll see just in the Ring of Fire.
Wow.
There's places, China, Russia, Scotland had it, Mexico, Peru, Costa Rica.
Right.
All along, including Seattle had one, Portland had one.
What does that mean?
Had 7. Say again?
What does that mean? What does that mean that we're
The ring
seeing
of
all of
fire
this?
is lit up, and Mother Earth is not a happy camper at the moment.
Right.
Now, the amount of carbon dioxide over the last few years has gone increasingly higher, 7 to 10 times higher. Alaska and Russia have both had sudden explosive behavior where all of a sudden there'll be an eruption and an explosion will happen. It's been happening more in Russia, in Siberia, where the ground will just explode. And there'll be 40-foot craters, 40 feet wide and 40 feet deep. In Alaska, there's been bubbling up of carbon dioxide coming up into these lakes all through Alaska.
So
now, this is what's happening. Now, mix that with the large amount of energy that's coming off the sun, and it doesn't take much to ignite anything, including sparks from electricity, from things. There's all sorts of things that are happening, and this is cataclysmic. I mean, we have densely packed people in a volcanic region of Southern California.
Yes.
They've been waiting for major earthquakes.
Right.
They're having them on a daily basis, and what I saw was fires, earthquakes, floods, more fog. Now, the fog part, very interesting. People are saying it doesn't feel cold, and there's no feeling or sensation, but a strange smell.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, somebody in Maryland posted something recently and said, not only that, we see strange lights. Now,
was this before the drones or after the drones?
This is all since the drones. Now,
okay.
One of the things I was told, here's a really strange thing that they told me from the other side.
Okay, go ahead. That's what I'm interested in. What did they tell you, Scott?
Do not believe anything your government is telling you. Matter of fact, I write about that in the book.
Yeah.
Do not believe anything your government is telling you.
Right.
Evil is running your government and the major governments of the world. And because we're living on a dichotomous world between good and evil, evil has taken hold of all the governments of the world that claim that they're running. Now, the people we elect in power, our presidents really aren't running, or our prime ministers are not running the government. There is a government behind the government. Now, not only are we living on a dichotomous world between good and evil, we're living on both a schooling planet and a prison planet at the same time, and it's been that way for eons.
Mm-hmm.
We not only have evil fighting between good and evil with us, we also have aliens, 52 races of alien beings who come to visit our world because of the dichotomy of good and evil.
Now, did they give you a download or information in regard to it being specifically 52 alien? Yeah. Okay, cool. So in regard to that, what is their purpose for us with? All
right. Number one, God put us on this planet. We volunteers as souls to be in the worst neighborhood in the entire universe, to come down here to grow, evolve, and become who we really are. Take into account that God put us when we were ancient beings that weren't really developed. Ancient astronauts and alien beings came down and genetically modified us. Like the story of, Adam and Eve.
Okay.
Adam and Eve were genetically modified beings. And some of the reasons we had the things between, Noah's Ark was because of all the interference that had come down from alien beings and evil that God had to get rid of, the giants and so. Well,
now, did you get any information that Jesus was a modified hybrid?
No, I got the information that Jesus was not of this world to begin with. When he came in, he lived in a different realm.
Okay.
He was actually Venusian.
Okay.
And the Venus we see is not the Venus he lived in.
Okay.
And that his choice, some people will argue with me. I asked Jesus who he was originally, and I heard Michael the Archangel.
Okay.
And several of the beings I worked with are a lot of the angels. And they said, well, didn't you just say you saw Jesus and Michael the Archangel up in heaven? And the thing is that people don't understand. We think with a linear mind.
Right.
And that's not how it operates. You can be three different beings simultaneously because you're all part of the same being. It's all about how your filters are, and you understand your reality. And since they said I had to come back and do this, I think of Jesus and Michael both separate and together, depending on the circumstances.
Interesting. I've always had a very strong connection to Archangel Michael. So I find this fascinating, Scott. So let's go back into some of the information that you were imparted in your near-death experience. Was it difficult? Because I know for myself, it came like I had an immediate remembrance of some information, and then over a short period of time, maybe a few weeks or months, more information came to light for me in my awareness, in my development of meditating upon the experience. Because I too was like 17 years old. So it was like what I was able to retain initially wasn't everything. So I love that you were able to retain so much.
Right.
And
anytime Lisa, anytime I forget something,
right,
they will show me the information. For instance, when I had to write this book,
okay,
they first told me I couldn't write a book. I wasn't ready. I wasn't strong enough. I hadn't recovered enough to do my job, which is to help people heal.
Okay.
That's my job.
Okay.
All right. So I said, well, if I don't write it down, I'll forget it. They
right.
said, don't worry about it. When you need it, we'll help you remember it. So basically, the book came out 2 years ago, and they helped me remember it every 3 to 5 o'clock in the morning, 3 to 4 days a week. So between 3 and 5 in the morning, they would wake me up and show me the memories, and I would just type away 3-4 pages at a time, and then I would go help my mom. And then in 9 months, I had completed the book that you read.
Wow.
And so they would help me remember everything. Now, my IQ is only 149. Now, it's just shy of genius, but I don't need to be a genius in order to do what I do.
Right.
I simply, if I need something, I ask, and they'll tell me where to find it, or they'll just tell me right out, this is what you need to know about. So humans have to understand, we receive information from two sides, being on a dichotomous world. We either receive them from the good and God, or from bad and evil. Remember, we live on a planet of good and evil.
Duality.
Our jobs are
right.
to master this reality. We have to master it, endure, persevere, and overcome it, because as true children of God, we have the opportunity on this world to grow and spiritually evolve better, greater, and faster than any other beings on any other worlds, whether you call them star seeds or
right.
light beings.
Right.
But near-deathers like you and me, 90% of us know that heaven is home,
right.
not any particular world, because we come to this world to experience something.
Right.
Whether we're an earthling or something else. 70% of this planet can't wake up because they come and they were born. They call this world home. I'm not one of those people that call this home.
Right, me either.
So every bit of information either comes through dreams, sometimes even lucid dreams. Between 3 and 5 in the morning, I will wake up, which, by the way, the Sufis understand as awareness that this is when God talks to you the best, because it's the quietest moment. And in that quiet and solitude, you will hear the voice of the Creator. I call it my God voice.
Okay.
And you will begin to recall this. I have volumes and volumes of things that I had written down because I couldn't store them in my head. I just kept writing things down.
Right. I was wondering about that because I know for myself, I have to process it and put it on paper or record it physically, because otherwise I'll be stuck. It's like, the download will stop. I won't get any more. It's like, oh, yeah, you have to retain this and get it out there before more comes in,
Right. And the biggest thing is you cannot be afraid.
Right.
And so I teach people the most common reason we get sick is because we allow evil in the door. And the first and most common cause is fear. So with all these earthquakes and soul shakes and fires and fog and ice, All evil wants to do is keep us in a constant state of fear, because if you are in a constant state of fear, they can control and manipulate you,
right?
And not like vampires who suck your blood, but the evil things, including the other beings from other worlds who don't like us,
right?
They will control and manipulate us through this fear because they feed off of it. That's okay. What they feed off.
I have a question on that, because I just experienced something like this, and it brings me right to this fear piece. And I have to step back a little bit to explain it. So one of my most powerful experiences, at one point in my life, I have 4 children, and I would take my children, dress them up every Sunday, and take them to a different house of worship, whether it was a temple or it was a synagogue, it was a Catholic church, it was evangelical. And one of the most powerful experiences I ever felt was going into an all-Black church where their choir was singing, and the Holy Spirit was, my hair must have been standing on end. I mean, I felt the Holy Spirit astounding. Okay. So my kids are looking at me like I'm purple, green, and orange. And when the heck are we getting out of here, Mom? And I am loving it. I am reveling in this energy, right? But I've also recently spoken to a very devout woman who is also, she's a Black woman, and she has very strong faith. And if you're friends with people who have a very generational faith, it's thick, it's deep, it's powerful, it's palpable. You can feel it. And she was explaining to me how she had this very negative domino effect, like a lot of things hitting her like in 3 days. Like she lost this, and this happened, and this person died, and like horrible things, right?
And another test.
Yes. And what she said to me was one of the most powerful things I've ever heard. She said, I knew I was being tested, and I knew that God was wanting me to praise God and stay in the high glory and stay in the high energies. And I thought, wow, that is so simply put and so powerfully stated, that when we're tested among the realities of this world, so many of us, because of the human condition, we go into a state of sadness, depression, fear, anger. Yes. And it's like when you can pull yourself from that space, and even if you're not feeling it, you're singing the praises of God and staying in the high glories. Those are the realms of where miracles happen. And it was so powerful. So I want to interject a little diversity here, that it's amongst so many different religions.
Everybody.
Yes.
By the way, the reason the book is called There Are No Lions in Heaven,
yes,
is because when you get to heaven, they're not going to say Christians or
right.
Jews over here. My patient at the time was a man named Mr. Brown, and he came from the Gerson Institute, which they do cancer curing stuff in Mexico. And so he came to me, and I said, why are you hiring a Jewish guy? He said, I heard you met Jesus. And he said, I'm really devoutly Christian. I've never met Jesus. He hasn't appeared to me. I said, do you realize I'm related to Jesus? I'm 790 times descendant. I'm in the line of David. I'm in the Kohanim class of Jews. I'm related to Aaron of the Bible and Moses. Moses would have been my uncle. Aaron would have been my grandfather.
Man, that's cutting it to the quick there, Scott.
Yeah. And when he calls me, I'll call him Big Brother. I probably had a past life with him when he was alive, as we know him on earth, as Jesus.
Right.
So, first of all, my adopted grandmother, Martha Hawkins, adopted me. And she's a Black lady from Alabama. I met her. She was my first client patient in Chicago when I was a student there. And she adopted me, and she said to me, Dr. Robinson, I know those eyes. I've seen those before. We've been together. And she adopted me in her church, one of those churches you talk about.
Right.
And I had an adopted family there in Cabrini Green, Chicago, which was an all-Black neighborhood. And she was part of that group. And she saw angels. She saw dead people like me. And we loved each other. And that was from another previous life.
Neat.
So I have the other side of my family is Chinese.
Oh, wow.
Chinese Buddhists. And that was both my sister-in-law, her family was from Hong Kong, And then my uncle married a lady from Taipei, Taiwan. And so I have a Chinese side of the family. So I grew up with some very interesting experiences.
Right.
Pick your Sagittarian life next time, because you get some really interesting experiences.
I don't know. Pisces seems to fit me pretty well.
You're used to it. I can tell you.
I meld real well.
But Pisces, my grandmother was a Pisces. Martha was a Pisces. And that dealt with love and family in a different way than Cancerian.
Yes, very much so.
And as a result, family came around her. She had 10 children and 50 grandchildren, and she adopted me in front of the church, in front of her family, and I became just like family. And as a matter of fact, I was probably one of the very few white guys that was walking down in Cabrini Green, and they would come over to me and say, "What you doing here?" And I said, "I'm going to see Martha, my grandmother." And they went, "Oh, you must be Dr. Robinson." So I grew up there, and I lived there. And Martha until her death, and we had some wonderful conversations. Now, she also used to talk to people who had crossed over.
Okay.
But when I came back, I had the ability to help people heal through prayer. I can identify faint matter or dark energy around a person. I can tell them what's going on. I can tell them their mission and purpose in life. I can also tell them how to do this Einstein, tuning into the source, asking for help and healing. I help people with verbal frequencies remove fear, like that. The number in order to eliminate fear is very simple: 8732-966-7488. So I have verbal frequencies.
Wait a minute. Say that number again. I'm going to write that down. Go ahead.
8732 9667 488.
And that eliminates.
That will eliminate the frequency of fear. And I tell my clients, please say this number 15 times before bed, so that your adrenaline and your adrenal complexes and adrenal corticosteroids don't kick in and disturb your sleep, and you'll end up with nightmares.
There you go, audience. I'm going to say it real slowly for you again. The number is 8732-966-7488. You do it 15 times a day before bed. It's to eliminate the frequency of fear. I am going to try that because I have one fear I'm trying to eliminate.
Frequencies for those things. But the next one, most common thing besides fear, overwhelm.
Yes.
People are in overwhelm.
Yes.
And that's an easy number to help with. 6264-8498.
Hold on. We're going. 62. Go ahead. 6264. 8498. And that is for the overwhelm. Thank you so much for sharing this with the audience, Scott. This is so nice.
And one number else, if people are having pain, this is part of pushing faint matter, removing negative dark energy.
Okay.
I always like to use it as lovingly, gently, soothingly, forgivingly. When I have a person focus their energy on the body part that hurts, but there's also a number. And if you can say the number is 55515.
I just read an article on this. And it was a research, and it was exactly what you just said about pain. Oh, you are phenomenal, Scott. So as we're summing this up, I want the audience to have information on how they can contact you or become a new patient client for you.
They're God's patient. They're my client.
There we go. And so how would they reach you, Scott?
All right. They can contact me, believe it or not, on my phone, 760-917-2625. Again, that's 760 area code, 917-2625. You can get through to me by my website, https, :// there are no lines in heaven.com, one word.
Okay.
So you can go through an appointment that way, or you can text me. You can find me on WhatsApp, the same phone number. You can read the book. All my contact information is on my book, which you can get through Amazon. You can either get it for $9.99 on the ebook variant, or you can buy it in the big text. I have a size 18 font so that you can read it without having glasses on. As a matter of fact, you wrote to me and said, "Gee, I can read this without glasses."
No, I don't use glasses. I don't use reading glasses. I loved the big text though, but I don't use reading glasses.
So the biggest thing is, you can read that size 18 font, and you can get that on Amazon. And the other thing is, if you need me, you can get through to me at Healer to Be Sure. That's HEALER, the number 2, the letter B, the word sure, SURE, @gmail.com. So Healer
Awesome.
to Be Sure at gmail.com.
Wonderful.
The website has, I think, 10 different videos on there of some interviews and podcasts I've done, including a TV show from Good Morning Dallas. There's been a lot more than that. I've had 25, 26 shows now on podcasts and interviews that way. I've been interviewed twice in Vietnam. I've been in Australia, England, over in Europe, Canada, Mexico, and people have asked me to do all sorts of interesting things so that I can teach them about alternative medicine and spiritual healing. I have a group down in Mexico that wants me to come down and teach. So
wonderful.
Wherever you are, I will be talking for IANS, International Association of Near-Death Studies, God willing, that the West Coast is still present.
Right.
And that I'll be teaching in San Diego, Santa Barbara, and Seattle.
Oh, far out.
Yeah, I'll be traveling a lot in April. So
cool.
People said, why aren't you traveling in January, February, March? And that's because this aspect of fire, ice, and fog will be lasting.
Okay.
And it will be disrupting travel.
Okay.
And just be aware we're in really intense times.
Right.
But don't be afraid.
Okay.
As the angels have told me, hold your ground. Wait, hold until relieved, and don't give up. Just don't be afraid. Learn to do Einstellung.
Okay.
It's not prayer. It's not meditation. It's like prayer and meditations on steroids. And learn to do prayer. I have examples of how to do prayer to keep yourself safe from anything that might try to interfere with your life, how to break blockages, all sorts of wonderful things. That book is in its 3rd edition now, Lisa.
Right.
And so have I answered everything you
need? This has been wonderful, Scott. I've loved having you on the show. Thank you so much for your experience and audience. The name of the book again is There Are No Lines in Heaven by Dr. Scott G. Robinson. It is the 3rd edition, and it is an incredible accounting of his near-death experiences, as well as clinically integrative approach to healing physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Scott, thank you so much for being on the air today with Unlimited Realities and me. I have so appreciated talking to you and a fellow NDE. So thank you so much. And God bless you for your work. I really appreciate what you're doing.
God bless you. One of these days, I'm going to drive down to meet you.
Okay.
And I'm going to teach you how to do Einstein.
I'm really looking forward to that, Scott. So thank you. Stay in touch, and I look forward to it. God bless you and your purpose and your soul mission. Thank you, audience, for tuning in, and God bless all of you.
Amen.
Amen.